Texas A&M currently has 12 members of its transfer portal class. We're going to predict the role for each and every one of these players on today's episode of Locked On Aggies.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to predict how many transfers Texas A&M is going to land between now and kind of the end of the portal, of this portal window. But we're going to start the show predicting the role of all 12 current members of Texas A&M's transfer portal class. So we'll start here. I'll kind of start with we'll start interesting and get less interesting when it comes to who I think is going to play a lot and so on and so forth there. So we'll start with someone that I think everyone is really excited to see, and that is KC Concepcion, the former NC State wide receiver. And to me, KC Concepcion's role is quite simple. It's wide receiver one. I think that he is a player who, with great quarterback play, can have an incredible season. And, I mean, we've seen it. In his 2 years at NC State, he's put up almost 1,500 yards between the 2 years, another 400 or so rushing yards. I mean, KC Concepcion has been a dominant player for the Wolfpack. And I think that he comes over right now and becomes your best receiver. I mean, looking at the way he plays the game, he's going to fit in so well in this offense. Seeing what Texas A&M did last year with the wide receiver position, it's good to have a player in Concepcion who can come in and really just be that guy. Between 2 years, he had 839 yards in 23 and 460 yards in 24, 16 receiving touchdowns. He also had 320 rushing yards in 2023, 36 rushing yards in 2024, with 2 touchdowns on the ground this year. So he's got 18 total touchdowns in 2 seasons. Just a touchdown machine, a receptions machine, a guy that is going to come in and immediately help this offense. Texas A&M brought in a handful of receivers in the portal last time. Jabri Barber, Cyrus Allen, Bostic. I mean, we saw a lot of players come in the portal, and I mean, there weren't a lot of hits. I mean, it was not a lot of hits. You got a lot of solid role players. You know, it's like this is an NBA team, and you have a couple great role players, but you need the stars to win a championship, and that's the reality right now for Texas A&M in this wide receiver room. Last year they had some great role players at receiver. They had some of those guys that, if you look on the list of a Power 4 football team, you're going to see with 22 receptions for 310 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had a lot of those guys, but they didn't have any of the 7, 8, 9, 1,000, 7, 8, 900, 1,000-yard receiver type of player. And that's the type of player that makes the difference in, winning championships. So to me, that's who KC Concepcion is. I think he comes in and he's your wide receiver one, just like that. That's how good he is. That's how talented he is. Now, quarterback play, and we've talked about this a lot when talking about the receiver room, quarterback play is going to be a big part of this because, if we don't see Marcel Reed take that step to the next level as a passer, I could see Concepcion having like 500, in that 450 to 600 receiving yard level. If Marcel Reed does take that next step, I think you could see Concepcion get near 1,000 yards. That's how good he is. So quarterback play is going to be a big role in this. But yeah, I think the role for KC Concepcion is the wide receiver one for this Texas A&M football team. And I think he's going to have a really good year. The next guy we'll talk about here, we'll just stay on the wide receiver track, and we'll stick with Mario Craver right now. Mario Craver is a wide receiver who I think, Noah Thomas being here kind of threw a wrench in a lot of my predictions for this room. Now that he's gone, I think you're going to see a lot better players, or a lot better. Or you're going to see a lot of these players get a lot more snaps. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I believe that Noah Thomas would have gotten a lot of snaps this year. Him being gone opens up the window. Concepcion would have played regardless. Opens up the window for Craver and then Micah Hudson, who we'll talk about here in a minute. So as a freshman at Mississippi State, Mario Craver had 17 receptions for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had 3 carries for 7 yards. His best game of the season, you really could argue, was the matchup with Texas A&M, where he caught 5 passes for 42 yards and had a touchdown. So, he had 3 touchdowns in back-to-back games. If you want to know, like, the type of player Craver is, well, I mean, his 3 touchdowns came against number 14 at the time, A&M, number 5, Georgia, and number 1, Texas. He's capable of making some big plays. His touchdown against Texas was a 46-yard catch. His touchdown against Georgia was a 72-yard catch. He is capable of making big plays. I mean, it was 21.6 yards per reception this year for Craver. I think he's going to come in and be your wide receiver 2 right now. He's that talented as a freshman. Obviously, Concepcion's a little bit older, but I think Craver is going to be, and I think that's a darn good wide receiver 2. I think that he's an NFL upside player, and he's got a very bright future ahead of him when it comes to being a receiver for the Aggies. The next name is Micah Hudson, the other receiver. And to me, Hudson, he's the wild card of the receivers you've brought in via the portal. I think that he is, maybe when it comes to pure NFL upside, Micah Hudson has the highest upside. He's also, the biggest guy frame-wise. Casey Concepcion is 5'11", 189 pounds. Mario Craver is 5'10", $170, and Mike Hudson's 6 foot, 195 pounds. So he's a big kid. He's a guy that when he went to Texas Tech, I was like, I think we could see him here at Texas A&M very soon. And because we were obviously involved in his high school recruiting. Doesn't have a massive role at Texas Tech, but pure upside. I think that Micah Hudson's the best we got. So, watching his highlight tape from high school and his limited tape at Texas Tech, I'm excited to see what he's going to end up doing here, because I think that he could turn himself quickly into an NFL player. A lot of times we'll see this happen. 5-star recruit, go to school, doesn't pan out, whether it's because it wasn't a great fit, because they didn't get a lot of playing time, hit the portal, and then people forget about him. We see this happen all the time. It happens quite often now, especially in the new age college football. And I think that those players are capable of making comebacks. And I think that's what Hudson's going to do. I think that Hudson is going to make a comeback. So I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. I think that he's a guy that could have 400 or 500 yards this year and then to elevate it to the next level the following season. To me, if Concepcion has the year that I think he can have, I think he might be NFL bound after that. So if that happens, then it's, the young guy Miles, Hudson, and Craver. So I think that Hudson, if he could kind of build a stepping stone for the 2 years from now, he could be an elite player in the SEC and turn himself into an NFL receiver, which I believe he can do. So that's kind of the receiver room you brought in via the portal. And I think that they are wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. Concepcion 1, Craver 2, Hudson 3. So I'm fired up to see this room because I think it went from a massive concern on this team to one of the biggest strengths. You got a lot of good receivers. Heck of a job from Coach Elko to really fix this room. Heck of a job for Coach Wiggins. I'm fired up to see this room in action because I think it's going to be a, here to here type of movement for this Texas A&M wide receiver room. We have more players to talk about, a lot of defensive linemen, some corners, some tight ends. We're going to talk about all these players and their roles next year for the Aggies coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go and purchase tickets to whatever event you need tickets to, whether it is a sporting event, a concert, to go see a comedian. I talk about it all the time. My dad and I are going to see Shane Gillis here in a few weekends. Mom and I are going to a concert. Dad and I are going to a basketball game. We got a lot of different things I'm going to over the next few months, and all these tickets were Christmas presents, and got them all on Game Time. Love the Game Time app. It's easy to use. They have the best prices. I love how you can see what your seat is going to look like compared to the field, the court, the stage, and know what tickets you want to buy. Love every feature Game Time has to offer. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So the Aggies have done an incredible job to this point in the transfer portal. And what I love about what Coach Elko and his staff have done is they've brought players in at positions of need. And this is something I harp on often. Nothing frustrates me more than when there are blaringly obvious holes in a roster. We need receivers and we need defensive linemen. And then, why did we go get a running back? Or why did we go get, this position? Like, there are holes. Now, I'm fine going to get, hey, we feel pretty good about the linebacker room, but hey, let's go get one depth piece. I think that, there's stuff like that. That's fine, but it's the hyper focus, the early on, the visits, the recruiting dollars. How are you making sure that you're doing smart things and going to get players that really can help your roster? And I think for the most part, that is what this coaching staff has done. They've gone and got receivers, which we need, defensive linemen, which we need, tight ends, which we need. They've done a really good job at that. So I guess we will move on to the defensive line position. One player that I'm excited about is Tyler Onyenum. And I saw someone comment and say, well, the Iowa State run defense wasn't that good. And, to me, I don't know why that necessarily matters because he was really good. So knowing that Tyler Linham was great at stopping the run, like as a team, that doesn't bother me a ton, I'll just be honest, because he's great at stopping the run. The PFF grades, the stats, the tape, it all proves it. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles. He does a good job in the run game. And that's what he's going to be there to do. So I think he's a guy, I don't know if he's not a starter to me, but I can see him playing 450 snaps this year and being a significant, if that's between a bowl game, I could see him being a 35, 30 snaps a game type of player. So I think that he's going to bring that run stopping ability, which Texas A&M needs in the portal, knowing what you're losing to the NFL and just flat out in the portal at the defensive line position. So that's his role. And I think he's going to come in and he's going to play it well. Then you've got the edge rushers. TJ Searcy is probably the guy that I'm most fired up about. the Florida transfer. I think that he's more of a proven player. So I think that he's a guy that is going to have that more significant role. I mean, this year for Florida, he, put together some fine numbers. He had 34 tackles, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, some good numbers. And I think that he is going to continue to take another step. I mean, he was a highly ranked player out of high school. I think he's going to continue to take those steps in the next direction, in the right direction once he gets to Texas A&M. So he's the one I'm most fired up about. I think that Dayon Hayes, the former Colorado edge rusher, he's a guy, 6'3", 265 pounds. I think that he's going to play a significant role for us. I think that he's going to be a guy kind of similar to Onyenum, who's going to play like, I'd say Hayes plays a little bit less snaps than Onyenum. I'd say he plays closer to 300, 350. But you're going to see him out there getting after the quarterback, creating havoc. He's a good football player that is, I think, just going to be one of those good role players for this roster. We talked about Mike Hudson being the wild card of the receivers you brought in. The wild card of the edge rushers is Sam Mpimba from Georgia. He's a player. I mean, he was a highly ranked 4-star out of high school. And I think that he's that player that has been around for a little while, but if he's able to take that step to the next level, he's going to be an absolute monster. Like, he has it in him is kind of what I'm getting at. So if this coaching staff can get that out of him, it's going to be really scary to see what the upside is for Sam Mpimba, but he's capable of doing something special this year. Then you've got your secondary players, Julian Humphrey and Jordan Shaw. Shaw from Washington, Humphrey from Georgia. I just don't see these two guys. Humphrey, I think maybe more than Shaw. You have a really good secondary. You needed depth and you needed to bring in some players. There's no question there. How much of a role they have, that's going to be interesting because I'm not 100% sure that you're going to see these guys play. Humphrey for sure is going to play a significant amount of snaps, but is he a starter? I don't know. That's one to leave in the YouTube comments. Do y'all see Julian Humphrey end up being a starter for this team? So I see them being role players, great additions because they bring in depth, but I don't see Humphrey potentially. Shaw, I don't see as a starter. Then you've got the tight ends, Mike O'Reilly and Nate Boracher, still working on that one. We'll get there at some point. Of course, Boracher. Okay, let's see. Boracher. That's how we'll roll with that. Boracher's from Nebraska, and Mike O'Reilly came from Auburn. I think Riley is more your upside tight end here. I like what his high school film looks like and the limited snaps that were on film at Auburn. I mean, there's clearly upside there. I see him being more your upside as a pass catcher, and Boracher being more of a run blocker, despite Riley actually, weighing significantly more. I mean, Riley's listed at 266 pounds. So that's kind of how I see this room breaking itself down with those guys. But I think both of them are going to play snaps. I think you're going to see a lot of snaps I think you're going to see a significant amount of snaps from both of these guys in a pass catching and in a run blocking variety. Then the last player is the quarterback, Jacob Zeno. To me, Jacob Zeno is a guy he's played a lot of college football. Obviously, Marcel Reed's your quarterback, but I think that Jacob Zeno can come in and be a veteran and just help this young quarterback room. I mean, Reed's still not the oldest player in the world. And then you've got your young guys on the roster. So I don't see Jacob Zeno playing a significant amount of snaps unless there's an injury, which obviously, as all Texas A&M fans know, we see this happen all too often at the quarterback position. But, I mean, for the most part, I think that you're going to see Jacob Zeno just be a leader in this quarterback room. You're not going to see him play a ton of snaps, but he's a good addition because he gives you veteran depth at the most important position on the field, and he's also a guy now that can help teach these younger quarterbacks. So I think this is an all-around great addition to the roster, despite him probably not playing a ton of snaps. Now that we've talked about the players you've brought in via the portal, we're going to break down what else do you need? How many more players are you going to bring in? We are going to talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. There's a lot of fun things to bet on right now. NFL playoffs, college basketball, the college football playoffs. There are just so many exciting, great things to sit and break down and bet on in sports right now. And you're going to want to go do it on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And, of course, the Locked On Podcast Network. The last thing I want to talk about before we call it a day is kind of, hey, where we're at with the portal. I mean, I think that Texas A&M at this point has done a really good job bringing in what you've needed. To me, I think what you need, I would still keep going on that interior defensive line. I think a good question is, how do we feel about the receiver room after losing Thomas? I mean, do we feel like we need anything else? I felt pretty good about it. And then, of course, Thomas decides to leave. And I now kind of go, okay, well, I still feel pretty good, but do we need anybody? And, that's a little bit of something to monitor. Because, I mean, I think you could go get somebody in that room, but I don't think it's a necessity knowing, what the young guy, Miles, and some of the other guys you got on roster. But still, I think we're in a good spot with tight end now with your two additions. I feel pretty good. So to me, it's, if you want to bring more in the secondary, I'm not going to yell at you. If you want to bring in a depth linebacker, I'm not going to be upset about it. I think you need more defensive linemen without question. I would go bring in more interior defensive linemen. I think you've done a good job shoring up this edge rusher room, but I still at that same time think you need to go and get some players in that interior, that defensive line. Then lastly, I mean, like I said, you're good on running back. I think you're good on quarterback. You're good on receiver now to me. Offensive line, if you wanted to go bring in a couple offensive linemen, I would not be upset about it. I think that you've got a great offensive line. The question is depth, and you're bringing in a great recruit, obviously, via your 5-star out of high school, and you got some young guys on roster from last year's recruiting class. There's a good amount of linemen on the roster, but if you kind of wanted a one-year rental veteran, I wouldn't be upset about it. But, I mean, I think that's kind of where we are right now in the transfer portal. Feel pretty good about it. I think the staff's done a good job. I think that they're, 3, 4, 5 players away from perfecting this transfer portal class and having the Aggies looking really good heading into next season. But let me know in the YouTube comments, what do y'all think we need in the portal left after those first additions? That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank y'all so much for being here every single day. I really, really do appreciate it. I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. That's going to help me out a ton, help out the show a ton. Do it on YouTube, do it on podcast platforms. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day today, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Aggies.